Huge brand strat.
Hello.
That's your name.
Yes. It's good to be here.
Yeah. Have people started calling you that now?
Friends and family, yes. Disaffectionately, I would say. Yeah, it's like, I mean, I think it's a good summation of the fact that like, Eugene is the person, but Huge Brand Strat is the entity in the brand, and the equity is concentrated.
Does that help you also separate it a little bit mentally?
No, not at all, I think, because the name or the handle is one asset, but the main asset is this and this. That's because I make visual content. Yeah. So I'm seeing a psychologist about it.
Yeah. How did you start creating content? What made you start doing that? I also want to ask what the process is like.
I am a brand strategist by background and also a lecturer at the University of Melbourne, which I don't do that anymore because I'm doing this full time. I worked on corporate strategy, category brand strategy, like brand architecture. So all of these things that were like, I considered highly influential to business, but you very rarely saw the outputs of. You know, there was a brand project I worked on last year where the design phase is still not completed. It still hasn't been released to market. So it's very difficult to show what I'd actually done with my life. And so the original idea was build a portfolio of thinking when you can't show the work. So what can you show? Well, you can show process, you can show perspective, and then you can start to think about the things that interest you, and you can build conversations around that topic. And so that's effectively how I got started, was just starting to think about what are the kind of things that I tend to speak about. Many of them actually, you know, in the early days I was doing the classic brand, what is an insight, you know, what's a real brand strategy look like, doing all of those things that I thought I should do. And then I realized that I was just talking to other strategists and trying to impress other strategists. And strategists have many things: money, power, you know, influence is not any of them. And so instead I just started talking to people. So I changed my audience from people that were interested in, you know, marketing to people that were interested in culture and society. And I found this out after the fact. People that are interested in understanding why they feel the way they feel about society right now. Like, I know why we do, but you know, I have a background in academia. I also have a background in, like, I'm also a educated person that received a really good education for the entirety of my life, like very privileged in that regard. And then also on top of that, I worked in brand, and then I have friends that are in philosophy and as well, culture, like in the culture industries too. So I have all of that context that helps me to understand why, and certainly probably all of us would have a little bit of a perspective too. Well, some of my friends always made fun of me about it. They're just like, yeah, you're always talking about concepts, you know, you always want to have the conversation about concepts. Yeah. The only difference is that now it's much more codified, and you know, I'm actually now having to deal with the problem that the thing that I enjoyed talking about, concepts, etc., is now my career. Yeah. And so, as with any,
is that just beautiful? Is that fun as shit?
Yeah, of course. It's the same relationship that I would say any artist, and I wouldn't call myself an artist, but it's the same relationship that any artist has with their art when it becomes their commercial career as well.
Have you lost the joy in it?
I haven't. The problem is that everything, I call it the everything is content problem of any conversation that you have where you learn something interesting about the world.
This is content.
You're like, that might make a great video. And one of my friends said to me back in November, they were like, you know, I don't appreciate that we have an interesting conversation and 3 weeks later I see it up on the internet, 1 million views, and I know that you're making money from that shit. So I think like that's been an interesting development with my own relationships in my life, that I've had to effectively guard my personal life from my life as a public figure and as a creator and as a person.
Is that difficult? Because isn't that where isn't talking to interesting people where you come up with the concepts?
And it's funny because I just posted a video about this within the context of Sabrina Carpenter yesterday. There is a framework in my mind of, is it exchange or is it extraction? Yeah. So it always has to live on exchange. Not like, I can't have a conversation with someone for the purpose of extracting interesting thinking and concepts.
You were having an exchange that gave you an idea. I'm a songwriter. It's the same like concept where you'll be talking about something, or you have a relationship and then you want to write a song about it, and then that person's like, wait a minute. Yeah, this was our life and not a song.
Exactly. It's exactly that. And you know, artists make art about their lives, and so that's, I think, like there's a real commonality between all of the stuff that we create. You know, the reason I don't call myself an artist is because I explicitly make stuff to make money, and I also make it because I'm interested in it as well, but it is distribution oriented. So I think a true artist doesn't make content. The art they make is an expression of something fundamental about themselves, the way they see the world, humanity, and attempt to express the human condition.
Is that becoming increasingly difficult though? Because I'm not making an album for a year and a half. I'm gonna be like, all right, agent, put it out if you want to. Like, you know, I'm currently like, I have a need to put something out today. Distribution is so on top of my mind.
Yes.
Does that just ruin the point of discovery in art?
Well, yeah, so I mean, that's a even broader conversation, I suppose, about like that kind of like the commerce art, the tension that lives between it. And I think that is the tension that a lot of artists have to work through is, am I an artist or am I a content creator? And what is I think it's a sliding scale, but it's like, what am I comfortable giving, and in what context am I comfortable giving it? Because I want my art to be seen, I want my art to be successful.
Right.
Even many of those pure play artists, where do they live? They live in London, they live in New York,
right,
where incredibly expensive places to live.
Right.
So either they come from very wealthy backgrounds, or they have very wealthy patrons. I make no judgments on this, but there's a transmission there between, this is Bourdieu, like all forms of capital are interchangeable. So they're trading their cultural and social capital for economic capital.
Right. I want to go ahead and talk to you about this for 9 more hours, but I'm going to ask you something different. You talked about mosaics versus stories. I thought that was such an interesting concept. Can you explain that? Because I feel like in the world that we're sitting is a world of stories, and it is tight stories. And you described a brand. You said a brand is more like a mosaic and not like a story. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think like it's something that I've been thinking a lot about over the past year. I made this video last year called Branding Amongst Brain Rot, which was effectively, what does it mean to show up on TikTok? Like, what does it mean to show up in the context of all these other TikTok videos? And then from that, I started this line of inquiry that was like, the era of mass reach, mass engagement media is done. And the way that brands have traditionally built their brands is as single linear stories that are all derived from a single 30-second TV advert. And it's a way that all the big ad agencies can't. It's what Cannes was built off effectively.
Right.
But it relied on, to build a brand that way, it relied on everyone seeing that TV spot that was then fragmented down into social, outdoor, cut downs, performance marketing agency, etc. So you built brands top down effectively. TikTok was the first way I started to think about it. Brand building is happening in reverse now. It's happening bottom up, and it's happening through what I call mediated contexts. So you don't own, it's like the opposite of D2C in a way. You don't own the path to the customer anymore, and it's getting harder and harder for you to own that through any one channel. There's extreme channel fragmentation, and even on the channels that we show up organically, it's mediated. We can look at that through the context of like brand partnerships and stuff where people are literally, you've got Elf Beauty and you've got Liquid Death showing up in a brand together, like literally mediated through the lens of one another's brands. But even on a place like TikTok, your brand doesn't live in the ad break. It's not entertainment ad. It is catastrophic climate event, best Met Gala looks, ad, fascism is back, something's happening in Iran, ad, etc. The line between advertising and entertainment is blurred, so you're building in a mediated context. And so there's effectively a story relies on being able to connect into some kind of coherent, like, mono or meta narrative that was really built off the idea that you would see that 30-second TV spot. But now it's the opposite. Your brand shows up in the context of a million other things. So effectively, when I say the metaphor we need is a brand as a mosaic, like the brand is constructed as an aggregate of dozens, hundreds, thousands of individual tiny little moments. Each one of these moments has to make sense on its own, not within the context of the big campaign. It has to make sense as a piece of entertainment on its own.
As a whole thing.
That then, in the aggregate, when you step back, is what the brand strategy ends up being.
How do you plan for that brand now? And how is it different than we traditionally used to plan for it?
First off is that, we leave behind that idea of the big ad, like that. I think that's the first thing. It's like why a lot of these ad agencies are struggling is they still think about it in the context of we're going to build the campaign through the 30-second ad spot. So like the creative platform effectively becomes this exercise of how are we going to bring that story to life. I think I've been having a lot of interesting conversations about what it means to bottom-up brand build and inductively brand build rather than deductively. So rather than you spend 6 months on developing a strategy, a persona, and then 12 months from now you might get something out into the real world. Test propositions through creator marketing. Test propositions through performance marketing.
Yeah.
And stuff that works in those contexts, start to bring that upwards into a little bit more creator marketing, then maybe owned marketing, and then you build the brand platform up against that. So you build it up through the context and you scale it up into the aggregate.
I always talk about this as like, instead of architecture, it's like on a clay wheel. Like you're slowly shaping this thing up instead of like knowing the plans, constructing the thing. How do you keep vision on where you're going? If you're a large brand,
so I guess like that's effectively that is the question.
Right.
So if we think about like what the marketing skills were for the past 50 to 60 years versus what the incoming marketing skills are, if we want to call it the age of artificial intelligence, the media is only going to get more fragmented from here. The culture is only going to get more fragmented from here. The volume of creative is only going to increase from here. So the skill set becomes intuition and orchestration. So intuition in that you as a marketer have to have a sense of self, and particularly, and the higher up you go, a sense of self and a sense of conviction that you know intuitively that it feels right, and that is a muscle that probably existed more in the past, but then I think we lost a lot of it with performance marketing, where we were like, we can just fucking track everything with ROAS.
So you're saying a brand visionary up top that is the creative director of the brand effectively.
Yeah.
And fashion brands used to do this really well and still do this really well, more so than other brands, that there is a creative director saying, I think this is the vision, and then everything is kind of like they're steering the ship to that vision.
Yeah.
Do you think that more and more brands will start to get a creative visionary up top?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that, again, they'll have to have someone, partly that will be the fall guy, but then also like someone that is willing to put themselves on the, like, I think where we're heading to is an era of like, despite what everyone's saying about data, and that we're actually heading to an era of like intuition and conscious subjectivity. If I think about why my platform's been doing well, I have never billed myself as a passive, objective observer of culture. It's always been, here's what I think, here's my perspective. And if I'm getting paid now, and I'm doing better than I was as a salaried employee, obviously, what I found the biggest step change for me was, when I was a strategy director, I was expected to be a passive, objective observer of the customers, of my client's brand, and return an objective truth, whereas now they pay me for a subjective truth. They're like, what do you think we should do based on what you know? And you can do research and have conversations, but I want to hear your ideas on this.
Do you think that's going to happen more and more?
I think so.
Or it should happen more and more?
Whether it should, I don't have the answer for that necessarily. I think it will. If we have the conversation about AI, I think what I've heard, not on the big stages, but in the in-between conversations that are the really interesting ones, is forget 5 years, think 10 or 20, and definitely think 30. By 30 years, the value of knowledge and intellectual capital, or intellectual labor, I should say, is going to be flattened to zero.
Yeah.
And that is going to happen slowly and then fast. But in the interim, what I think you have, what is the moat for a knowledge worker? You don't have one unless you have a perspective. So that's like, a lot of my work has been
your
about...
perspective is your moat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Building the perspective, that's very subjective. And even if someone built an AI of me, they wouldn't be able to predict what I would say next about something. But
they would only be able to look at what you've done in the past and
Yeah.
predict what as another thought.
Yeah, exactly. And my thinking
learning.
evolves over time as well. Yeah. And I think people, and I don't need to go through all the fucking buzzwords here of like, people want to talk to people and they want to transact with people, but it's not just that they want to transact with people. They want to transact with people that have conviction in a perspective, because it feels like it's getting harder to. It's getting harder to make sense of everything. It's getting harder to be able to say, this is what I think is actually happening. When I was like, I actually think I've got something here, was when people started to say in my comments, I don't work in marketing, but you're helping me to understand these things that I was feeling it, but I didn't know how to articulate it.
Yeah.
And I feel that's, like the people that can sense make. And that's why I think like strategic thinking and brands, maybe not brand strategy, but the skill sets of a strategist are still so important in the world that we're coming into. They're just not well placed for living in agency where your job is to post-rationalize ads and sell shit.
Right. But can those visionaries be in the agency though? If there's a scarcity of those creative visionaries, right? and not every brand can have one. Isn't that the point? Isn't that the argument of an agency with creative visionaries, independent, that people tap into you and say, hey, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean,
You're effectively an agency giving that opinion to a few people.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really interesting about what we're seeing with why all of the small shops are starting to do much better than the holdcos.
Yeah.
Because the holdcos, despite what they say, they're not subjective. And there may be some subjective forces in there. You may have, and that's everything that I've heard about every client that's worked with a big agency. They say, there's 3 good people in that business out of a couple hundred, and I work with those people. But effectively, those 3 people are now realizing I can make more money if I go out on my own. Because over time, people are getting more and more comfortable, like big businesses, and the bigger, and they're getting big now. Like in Australia, Telstra and Bear Meets Eagle on Fire, like they're doing, they just want a lion, like a gold lion, of just I have more than one agency, and one handles all the executional work, but the big, interesting ideas that's coming from a very subjective point of view. Yeah. So I think it's a good thing.
The smalls and the mids, what they have is like one creative visionary, a couple, like, because the idea has to be almost so singular. Even if you have a lot of people kind of like constructing that idea, at least as long, I think more and more people people used to come to even our agency to find what is right, and now it's more so, what do you think? What would you do?
And it's an interesting development of people, as again, that irony of we got given too much information and now we don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
We need sense makers.
Yeah.
I'm paying you to solve a problem for me, not play back what you think I think.
Yeah. Let's get you in trouble for 1 second.
Yeah, go on.
You said, this isn't a quote from you, this is just kind of like the understanding that I had, but do you think that marketers ended up pushing the world a little towards the right?
I think marketers had a role to play in pushing the world further to the right, and they did it with good intention.
And I put that myself in that category, by the way.
Yeah, of course. And I did brand purpose jobs as well for the largest carbon emitters in Australia. You do, especially earlier in your career, you do what you do. Like there's the no ethical consumption or production under capitalism. But I think like this has been like the heart of the problem with Western society over the last 50 years, but it's gotten worse over the last 30 years, is what happens when you decouple social progress from economic progress. So that's what's happened. And in particular, what marketing is responsible for is not just advancing social progress, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. It's a good thing as a person who is mixed race and queer, but certainly I've done well out of it. It's not just the social progress, it was the performance of social progress. So all of that work that was done in the 2014, when was peak brand purpose? I don't think it was a coincidence. It was 2016, when the world was starting to fall apart in terms of a meta-narrative. And we're like, fuck, 50% of the population thinks and lives in a very different context to we do. And like impotent San Francisco liberals, like they were being performed at with this marketing, and it was effectively just there to sell a product. I'm not denying that it had positive effects for marginalized communities. What I'm saying is, if you step back and look at it in the aggregate, when you perform social progress, but the people that perform that social progress are the ones that are responsible for the decline in economic progress, or at the very least, egalitarian economic progress, what do you think happens to the issue? Like, those things got conflated, and that's what I wrote in that Guardian article. Was it allowed the far right to position leftist thinking as in bed with corporations. That was the great coup, right? Disney is this woke, extreme communist entity. When you're like, Disney could not be further away from
the actual values of Disney.
The actual values of the complete opposite. The most middle of the road, the most conservative, the most. Yes, and of course, they've got a lot of theatre people in Disney, and they're interested in telling stories that are about marginalized communities. But that is as big of a business as it comes. And I think that was the thing that we enabled.
But do you think in the marketing side, it was trying to find meaning in this almost meaningless job?
I think there is, yes, that was one, certainly, and you know, a certain type of person is a marketer, and they live in certain places as well. It was also...
And they care about emotion, and
yes,
they care
exactly,
about,
and we had all of
that's how
this, and of course the research agencies as well have a role to play in this, in that all of the research coming back about millennials was the most values-driven generation in history.
Yeah.
They'll stay, but I buy from brands that I believe in.
How
I
true
believe
do you think that was? Or
I think it was extremely overblown.
Yeah,
I think it was, but, and you know, and it's also, of course I can say it was extremely overblown because it was demonstrably proven to be extremely overblown. But that was it's always been the problem with me, is that we should not have made climate, and I've got a video coming about this in a couple of, we should not have made social progress and climate and aesthetic that we can charge a premium for, because not only does that make it us believe that it's a problem that we can buy our way out of, at the same time, why do we brand? We brand to create intangible value that allows us to charge more for products, or it allows us to develop that intangible value that we execute upon in different ways. In doing so, all of this virtue marketing turned virtue into a premium product.
Yeah.
So it implicitly assumed that if you can only afford caged eggs, if you can only do this, if you can do that, you are a less virtuous person by.
And a lot of people who didn't have the actual currency to buy into that. Pushed back on that, because then, like, if you had this had the social purpose, social values, it was looked at as an elitist thing, and it was probably an elitist thing because we were making Bud Light marketing from the coasts, and the people who were drinking Bud Light were in the middle.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you know, I have a couple things on this, but like one of them is, it's not that I have a problem with the issues, it's that none of these things should be driven by the marketing department. Marketing is out there to create fiction, to build intangible value, to connect people to the products and services that are right for them. And I often say the most moral thing that marketing can do is be a little bit immoral. Be a little bit, or be at least clear or pragmatic on, I'm trying to sell you something, and I'm going to sell you an extraordinary fiction.
But like you said, because of how the research came in, people thought that they were building value.
Yeah.
Right? People want brands that support X. We are going to support X, and we're going to create value that way.
Yeah, exactly. That we're going to build it on the basis of symbolic identity and what we want. You know, that's why brand purpose was such a funny thing. How late capitalist is that? You know, we believe brands should not just be entities that sell things, but they should be people. They should be motivated by some deep underlying founding purpose that's not just about making money.
Do you think that's true, or is there a tinge of truth in that?
I think if you're if you're not a publicly listed company, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think if you're a publicly listed company, then your purpose is to maximize profits for shareholders.
Yeah.
And you can do that in the short term, or you can do that in the long term. But the purpose, this is Mark Ritson now. The purpose of purpose is purpose. Purpose requires the willingness to sacrifice profit. So, Patagonia, absolutely purpose-driven,
purpose is purpose,
privately owned. Canva, really purposefully driven, privately owned right now. And I think it's going to be really interesting to follow their journey as they get bigger and bigger, and they need investors to cash out, etc. What are you willing to turn down? What are you willing to say no to? And if people aren't willing to say no or turn those things down, then it's not really purposeful.
What do your students inherently get about marketing that you think marketers don't?
They have not yet subscribed to the fictional reality that marketing has created. Another problem that marketing is dealing with is that it's built upon certainties.
Yeah.
And the world is getting more unpredictable and more uncertain. So how can you build a brand persona when everyone lives in their own reality bubble, effectively, right?
Right.
And so what we do instead is we pretend that the world is predictable and that the world is certain. And we talk very openly and optimistically about what AI is going to do in the next 3 to 5 years.
And in brand strategy as well, we try to measure our way out of, like, if we do this strategy, this thing will, same thing with purpose, right? Like we said, people care about this. If we care about this, our brand will go here.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think
our strategists ruining the world.
No, I think the thing about strategists is that they don't have any power at all. You know,
Right.
like, maybe at a small shop or whatever. Like, some strategists have, that run their own agencies have power and vision. But go to any of these big holdcos and tell me where the CSO sits. It's very rarely at the top. You know, it's very rare that the strategy.
They're mostly run by the top about 20 to 40 executives in holdcos are usually accountants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
that was a harsh reality that I learned like last couple years ago. that the picture that you see of the like 3 or 4 people standing next to each other in black and white, that is like the agency photo, is not the people running the business at all. It is the people running the business, and this is like the marketing of the agency that look at these 3, 4 people, they run the business. They're presidents and CEOs and CSOs, and they're cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why I say I don't think it's fair to say a strategist ruined the world. I was like, strategists do not have enough influence to ruin anything.
All right, so I have a question from you that is from Joel. He said, and I quote, his is the only content that I don't watch on 1.5 speed.
Yeah, because I speak quickly.
Because you speak quickly and it's tight and it's like condensed. What's your process on coming up with these things, writing these things, and publishing these things?
It's incredibly unscientific.
Yeah.
So I have a Notion doc that is filled with headlines. And the headline is the concept, and it often becomes the hook for the video, or it becomes the title for the video. And in that Notion doc, every now and then I'll write a little note about what I think that this thing might be about, where I'm maybe seeing some signs, maybe put some links to some ideas and content that I've seen elsewhere that like, oh, this image, Sabrina Carpenter, this blah, blah, blah. It sits effectively in this like bain-marie. And once an idea becomes strongly formed up enough, or I believe that it must be talked about within the next couple of weeks before it gets old, because there's an ecosystem here of other cultural commentators too, then I'm like, it's time to release this. So I made a video about Sabrina Carpenter that was released today. I was on the flight from Melbourne to here, and I was sitting in the Doha Transfer Lounge, and I was looking at the promo images for Man's Best Friend, and I was like, and I was looking at the discourse around Man's Best Friend, and I was like, there's something else here. And I started writing, like I was gonna make a little text, like a story about it. And then as I kept writing, I was like, no, actually this connects into another concept. It connects into another concept. I think like I come from, my mum's a doctor and my partner's an acupuncturist as well. I think like there's kind of no surprise, like there's a similarity there in that the culture that lives on the top is a symptom, and you have to find enough symptoms, and then you find the disease. And so for the Sabrina Carpenter one, it was actually like, this is not just about outrage, it's about discourse, but it's actually not about discourse, it's about the aesthetic of discourse. It's about the performance of discourse. And that actually relates to a deeper thing around media fragmentation and how we need to get lots of people creating content around this in a decentralized way, because I can't just push this out through a Vogue campaign anymore. I can't push it out through Rolling Stone. The individual gatekeepers don't have enough power. I need the power of the niches to hit the masses.
So do you write like a line, like go deeper until you hit?
You basically, like I write like line, and then I go backwards and forwards. That's how I write.
Do you have a filming day, or is it just kind of like, this video's ready? It's more about like, this is cooked, let's go.
Yeah, if I'm disciplined about it, which I try to be, Monday morning is a writing day and Friday morning is a filming day, and in between, I send it off to someone to help me find the images, I brief them on the images, sometimes easier than others. Like,
do you have a consistent person?
Yes, I do, but when I've got a video that is very much about culture and the internet and things like that, like, she's like the perfect person. I love you, Lily, if you're watching this.
Right.
She's perfect for that. When I'm doing more brand-centric stuff, then I have to do that myself, because it's like, you're not gonna understand this reference about this like particular strategic concept, because it's incredibly niche. Like, and that's the thing, like, I'm not the first brand strategist to make content. But I think why my stuff cuts through is because I'm a brand strategist that doesn't talk to other brand strategists.
You're such a bright spot in this industry, and you've shown up out of nowhere and made this whole thing brighter, because I think your ability to simplify concepts and talk to me like a human being, which strategists sometimes want to purposely be kind of unrelatable.
Yeah, they want to perform their intelligence.
Yeah, they want to perform their intelligence. That's such a great way to put it. I wrote this post online a while ago, which was, every strategist thinks they're the smartest person in the world. The people around them just haven't recognized that yet. And they're constantly just like, if they only knew how smart I am, you would know. But your ability to simplify concepts and talk to me as a human being is awesome. And I think what you're doing online is such education. Whatever you were doing, teaching a small group of people, you're teaching a mass audience now, and thank you for doing it. It's like,
thank you. I really appreciate it.
Really great to be on the other side of that and waking up every day and seeing that and be like, okay, I'm going to take that to work now.
I'm incredibly privileged to be in this position. I kind of recognize that it all came together so quickly. And I think like the real privilege is that I got to merge the two parts of my career.
Yeah.
That I got to merge education and strategy, and now they live together. And for the first time in my life, like it feels like what I'm doing is fully reconciled. And
That's
I think
awesome.
I'm glad that I'm really glad that people are getting something out of it. Like that normal people are getting something out of it, and not just marketers. I think like that's like the greatest privilege, to hear people that are like, you helped me understand that, so thank you. And I was like, that's why education's so rewarding.
You and I are both heady conversationalists, and if we keep doing this, Mike will shoot one of us, and I'm not sure which
Yeah.
one. Thanks, dude. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah,
really.
of course. Thank you.
Yeah.